They called her Sigrid of the North Shore, and on the winter night of December 982 AD, she became the woman who broke the rope trial's logic. The Longhouse Gathering happened during the darkest week of the Norse calendar, when daylight lasted barely 4 hours and the sea wind cut through timber walls like frozen blades. The torches smoking in their iron brackets couldn't warm the hall. Nothing could. The cold was a living thing that winter, seeping through every gap in the planking, turning breath to fog and fear to ice in your veins. That's when they always held the rope trials during winter. Because cold makes people desperate. Cold makes them compliant. And cold makes rope fibers contract and harden into instruments that cut flesh faster than summer hemp ever could. Sigrid's crime was loyalty. She'd refused to name the man who'd hidden her brother after he was accused of stealing timber from the chieftain's shipyard. In the Viking world of 10th century Norway, loyalty to blood over clan was treason. Love was guilt. Silence was confession. So they bound her wrists with raw hemp cords soaked in ice water. The wetness made them tighten as they dried against her skin, and called it a test of the gods. But here's what the sagas never admitted: the rope trial wasn't divine judgment. It was social terrorism, a spectacle designed to remind every woman watching what happened when you remembered your own mind. Two opposing posts. Two teams of clansmen. One woman stretched between them until her body told them what her tongue would not. Endurance proved innocence. Collapse proved guilt. Either way, the woman always lost. The rope creaked as they fastened it between the hall's support beams, the sound sharp in the winter silence. The crowd gathered close, not for warmth, though the December cold made their joints ache, but for the spectacle. You could smell the fear. Not metaphorical fear. Actual fear has a scent, sharp, metallic, mixed with the smoke from seal oil lamps and the damp wool of winter clothing that never quite dried. That smell soaked into the timber walls of every longhouse where rope trials happened, a permanent stain that outlasted blood. The trial master, a man named Ulf, whose face looked like weathered stone, recited the ancient formula, "The rope shall know her truth." Sigrid stood shivering in the center, not just from cold, but from the knowledge of what was coming. They'd braided her long hair into the rope fibers themselves, a refinement added during winter trials because frozen hair snapped less easily than warm hair, prolonging the ordeal. Her breath shook, but she refused to cry. To them, that dry-eyed defiance was proof she had secrets worth hiding. They called it divine arbitration. Look closer, and you see the mechanism, a social control system designed to remind every woman in the hall what happened if she withheld, if she disobeyed, if she chose loyalty over submission. Because in the Viking world, where clan authority outweighed individual life, women like Sigrid became living warnings. Every creak of the rope, every drop of blood freezing at her wrists, whispered the same lesson: do not resist. The cruelty was never random. It was procedural, calculated, refined over generations into a science of fear. The hall's architecture amplified the horror deliberately. Narrow beams, close walls designed so struggle sounds echoed and multiplied. The December cold meant the timber contracted, making the structure groan and crack in harmony with the rope's tension. Smoke from the torches couldn't escape properly through the roof vent in winter. It hung in layers, making eyes water, making every breath taste like char and fear. This wasn't accidental. This was environmental engineering for maximum psychological impact. Sigrid's eyes locked onto the crowd. Some looked away; those would be questioned later about their lack of enthusiasm. Others stared fascinated, their silence becoming active participation. And somewhere behind that wall of faces, her 9-year-old daughter watched, because children were required to attend. This was educational. This was how you learned your place. The Viking paradox, a culture of explorers and poets who'd navigated to Iceland and Greenland yet codified torture as community entertainment. They believed truth was extractable through pain, that morality was measurable in endurance. But Sigrid's endurance revealed something else. It exposed not divine will but human weakness. As the rope tightened and her body formed a trembling arc, as the hemp fibers sang that high note between creak and scream, the chieftain's face hardened. She was lasting too long, already past the point where other women had collapsed. The crowd began whispering. If she survived much longer, the story might shift. The victim might become the truth-teller. The accused might become the mirror reflecting their own brutality back at them. The rope trial wasn't a single invention, but an evolution, a weaponized ritual appearing in scattered Norse settlements from Iceland to Jutland, from roughly 951,050 AD. In theory, it tested honor. In practice, it tested endurance, extracting compliance under the guise of fairness. The same ritual logic that would birth witch dunking 3 centuries later had its roots here in dim winter longhouses, in the hiss of frozen rope on wood, in the smell of fear rising like offering smoke to gods who never asked for it. The mechanism was devastatingly simple. The accused woman stood center hall while 2 ropes were bound to her, sometimes at wrists, sometimes braided directly into her hair, transforming her own body into the instrument of torture. The rope ends fastened to opposing posts, or threaded through iron rings, each held by 2 men of the clan. At the chieftain's command, they pulled, slowly, deliberately, until her body formed a human bridge between 2 points of authority. The rope didn't snap quickly. It sang first, a sound between scraping and shrieking that made witnesses' teeth ache. In winter, the physics changed. Frozen rope contracted, creating tighter initial tension. Cold made human tissue less elastic, ligaments tore faster, joints dislocated with less force. Women's hands went numb within minutes in the unheated hall, which meant they couldn't feel when circulation stopped, when fingers started dying from lack of blood flow. This was known. This was calculated. Winter trials had higher rates of permanent injury, and that made them more effective as deterrents. Everyone remembered what happened to Sigrid because they remembered it happening during the killing cold of December. What began as crude oath testing among warriors pulling rope to prove strength and loyalty mutated when applied to women. What was sport became spectacle. The female body recast as theater where pain performed as proof. This wasn't justice. This was propaganda. Each trial was public, each verdict performative. The clan didn't seek truth, it sought demonstration. Watching a woman collapse under strain reaffirmed the myth that men ruled because gods willed it. Her suffering was their reassurance that social order remained unbroken. And in that winter hall lit by smoking torches, thick with damp air so cold it hurt to breathe, fear became sacred. It seeped into the ropes, the timbers, the clothes of witnesses. Even the next morning, as they scrubbed frozen blood from floorboards, it lingered. That smell wasn't just physical, it was psychological residue, guilt they'd never name. Some fragmentary records carved into runestones or hidden in later Christian chronicles suggest certain women refused to cry out, that they stared directly at tormentors, unblinking until one of the men flinched and had to be replaced. These were small revolts, moments of defiance, drowned by centuries of silence. But the system needed those silences. The rope trial's endurance model mirrored Viking social machinery itself, relentless, cold, glorifying strength, while disguising fear as faith. Leaders framed it as divine arbitration, as if Odin himself leaned over the beams listening for truth's sound. But in reality, it was politics in sacred costume. The chieftain's authority rested not on God's will, but on the trembling wrists of women like Sigrid. The snap didn't sound like release. It sounded like thunder-muffled final, the kind that rolls over frozen ground before snow buries everything. Sigrid fell to her knees on the ice-cold floor. The hall went silent. In that terrible pause, you could hear nothing but her breathing, ragged, defiant fogging in the frigid air. The smell of fear wrapped everything again, thicker than torch smoke, as though the hall itself was sweating guilt despite the winter cold.